Hello, and welcome back to If These Old Beasts Could Talk. As you can probably see from the title, today I'm going to showcase some historical artifacts from what I believe to be an underrepresented portion of the rail fanning community, but one that definitely deserves some recognition. Now, I say this as somebody from the state of Michigan who has witnessed steam in real life, seen revenue freights go by every day, and whose general perception of a train for the longest time was a locomotive, not unlike Rio Grande 65 right there in front of me, with cars behind it and the locomotive supplying all the power. Now, of course, I came to the realization that multiple unit cars are just as much of a train as anything else. And through that, I researched the history and ended up getting a couple of relics from the New York City subway to add to my personal collection. And today, I'm going to showcase them for you all. So I guess a good start would be with what is the most obvious New York City subway, or rather New York City Transit Authority relic. This right here is a canvas revenue bag. These were used to store tokens, money, and all the other value storage systems that the New York City Transit Authority collected from day-to-day service in revenue and were redistributing or taking with a pretty cool type of train, actually, an armored multiple unit car to J Street, which used to be the headquarters for the New York City Transit Authority. There's actually an armored train that's preserved from the New York City Transit Authority for this purpose. I believe it's in the New York City Transit Museum. It's pretty cool stuff, honestly. Now, this bag has nothing in it right now. I was going to fill it with subway tokens until I looked on eBay and realized subway tokens are New York City subway tokens are kind of the Rolls Royces of exonumia collecting, and decided that the best course of option was not to fill it with anything and just keep it as is, like I have my Detroit Federal Reserve bag. Well, the Transit Authority did use that armored train for quite a while, with the aging of the vehicles and the movement of the MTA headquarters eventually. I think it was taken out of service around 2006, and nowadays these bags, I believe now it's MTA. Maybe some of them are New York City Transit Authority, and I think some of them may even be plastic. But nowadays they're transported by armored truck, just like a lot of other types of monetary transfers are done here in the United States, which is kind of sad to see such a cool system of money transportation go. But, well, such is the way. The next relic I have here is less obvious, but at the same time kind of obvious. This is an Ad-Lake Railroad lock. These this one isn't labeled for any specific railroad, were typically used on switches or pieces of hardware which required large moving objects to be seized, as opposed to locking cabinets to prevent access. For example, these were used on switches, mechanical points, and things you didn't want people, like, moving large parts of. Anyway, this lock, despite being not marked with any railroad, has a little bit of seller pedigree to it. I was told it came from the Willets Point Station in Queens, New York. So off the 7 line, either from the station itself or from Corona Yard, which also serves the 7 line. It's actually my only Ad-Lake lock with a brass shackle on it. All my other locks have steel shackles, aside from any locks that are of other types that have brass shackles. So my only Ad-Lake lock that actually has a different type of metal for the shackle than the actual body of the lock and the cover plate. Well, the lock itself didn't come with a key. I did experiment a little bit and figured out that, like, my master key that I used to open my Chesapeake and Ohio locks, as well as this brass original Penn Central key, does work in that lock. I'll get it open for everybody in a second. Another thing too, yeah, these Ad-Lake locks tend to not be too secure. You can open a lot of Ad-Lake locks with a lot of keys. Well, as you can see, despite the keyway being just a little bit oversized, that Penn Central key did manage to unlock the lock with it actually unlocking pretty smoothly. It's not like the nastiest, crunchy key turn I've ever had out of an ad lake lock. Which, another fun fact to note is, well, this was likely used on a piece of like moving like metal equipment. Most of the New York City subway used and still does use Rayco style screw locks, actually stamped NYCT for New York City Transit. Um, Now, these locks are still used in a lot of places. They're being phased out, unfortunately, due to their age, and their flaw, which is hitting them with a hammer, will pretty much open them guaranteed. But it's nice to see that there's always a little bit of variety in the security devices in a railroad company because, hey, you don't want the signal department being able to unlock switches and things that they shouldn't be accessing. And you also wouldn't want a conductor to accidentally open up a relay case and fry all of the hardware, which can be chaos considering the New York City subway uses a lot of aging GRS hardware and I think some USNS stuff too. For the next artifact, you're going to need a tiny bit of background as to how subway cars operate. Well, contrary to people's opinions, which I have seen, subway cars are not actually computer controlled, and for the most part, never really have been. I've seen that spoken a lot. People think, oh, subway cars are computerized, such a small thing. It's all seating on the inside. There's no space for a driver. And to that, you'd be wrong. There is, in pretty much all subway cars since the beginning, a tiny little nook, depending on the set, at each end of a car or each end of a set of cars, which is where a motorman would sit and operate both the braking, the throttle, and in certain cases the doors for the cars. Well, I have a piece of one of those cars, specifically a piece of the motorman's controls. Well, here it is. This might not look like much to the untrained eye, but through research and other forms of data collection, I have found out that this handle is indeed the handle out of an R1-9 subway car. It was ordered as such. Of course, it took research to find out that this was indeed the type of handle used because they used multiple types of handles, this being the Westinghouse variety. This is a dead man throttle handle, which means that normally, if it wasn't riveted by what appeared to be MTA workers, it would pivot up to prevent the train from moving and the controls from being operated in the case that the driver became incapacitated suddenly. A couple more facts about the cars that such a handle came out of. The cars being R1 through R9, or R1-9, were commonly referred to as R9s, ARNINES. These cars operated from the year 1930 to, I think it was 1974, well, don't take my word on that, 74, the end date is, iffy, but I know the order date was 1930. These cars operated from then. Some of them are preserved today. I think they are by far preserved in the highest quantity of all, per se, historical New York City subway cars. And I'm not sure if they were the first to take part in the artificial reef program. I do not think they were. But a lot of these cars ended up in different places. I think one actually ended up as far as Great Britain. I will provide an image of these cars right about now for you all, just so that you're on the same page as I am to the exterior appearance of these cars. Anyway, with that, I have to say, by far, my favorite piece of that collection right there is this handle, simply because I never technically owned a piece of a train before this, and well, now I do. So this thing definitely has a special place within my collection. I know there's another type of handle that's currently out there floating around, which I believe is a GE handle. Those were also used in the R1-9 subway cars. I think they were more common in the later models such as the R9. But they were, for the most part, to my knowledge, interchangeable. Like, you could put either handle on if you had the right rigging hardware on it. Anyway, That's been If These Old Beasts Could Talk. I hope you enjoyed this just little bit of artifacts from the New York City subway and a little dive into researching something that was a new topic for me, in all honesty. I never really thought that such a system could have so much history and really be such a big part of rail fanning as a whole. It's easy to forget that people's perception of trains is different, depending on where you are. For example, I know in places in China they still use steam, so people's perception of trains in China could, still be steam engine freights hauling everything. I know personally I grew up around a lot of old EMD units, 1960s stuff, so my perception is always that short hooded diesel locomotive. Anyway, this has been If These Old Beasts Could Talk. I hope you enjoyed this. I know I certainly did. Catch y'all later.